want your CPT book handy for this video, and we're going to talk about coding for procedures for the cardiovascular system. There are two specific types of procedures in cardio that tend to be a little tricky. So I want to talk about those two and how you can approach these two types of procedures and be successful. So the first concept I want to talk about is a pacemaker and an implantable defibrillator. And these are two different types of devices. So it is very important when you are coding for this that you pay attention to which one has been implanted in the patient. And there are different charges depending on exactly what has been done. When you implant one of these devices, they're actually implanted up here in like the chest muscular area. They create a little pocket in the muscle and they insert the generator, which is like the battery pack. And then leads, wires, run from the battery pack into the heart. The reason why we put it up here is that battery sometimes has to be changed. Batteries last about 10 years. Maybe you'll get a little more out of it. And when we go in to do a replacement, all we have to do is remove this. We don't have to mess with the wires. So we can unhook the wires, put the new battery in, reconnect the wires, and we're done. What that does is it means that we don't have to mess with the heart that often. Hopefully those wires last forever and we never have to mess with the patient's heart again. We just deal with this little muscle up here. Okay, so we can bill for the initial insertion. We were putting it in for the very first time, which includes putting in all those wires. We may have to come in and replace that generator or that battery pack. It is possible we may have to replace the lead. So there's a code for replacing just the lead. We also have single and dual lead pacemakers. And we may start with just a single wire and we decide we need it to be a double. So maybe this procedure we're going in and we're adding just the second wire, and that's the conversion from the single lead to a dual lead. Or we might take the whole thing out. Those are the kinds of procedures we're looking at. The single lead does run from the pacemaker or the battery into the atria or the ventricle, depending on what the patient needs. If you have a dual lead, we're running into one atria and one ventricle. I'm sorry, there's a typo there on atria that bugs the heck out of me, so my apologies. In your CPT book, if you look up code 32141, right underneath that code, you will see this chart. And this is really handy because it runs through the pacemaker codes versus the implantable defibrillator codes and what is it we're doing. So notice we have insertions and initial procedures, we have removals, and we have the conversion from a single to a dual lead. And so this is a really great chart. So you can certainly go to your alphabetical index like you do most of the time when you're coding, and you can look up pacemaker or implantable defibrillator, or you can just come straight to this chart. Now, how do I remember exactly what page is this chart on? That's a great question. So what I have done is in my alphabetical index in my code book, where it says pacemaker, it says C cardiac assist device. So it tells me to look up another word. But I have right next to it, C chart, page 216. Now, depending on what version of the book you have, yours might not be on 216, so don't just write my note. Go find out what page that's on. But if I know this chart exists, can't remember exactly where, but if I look up pacemaker, I've told myself exactly where it is. So I know how to find it very quickly, even though I don't know what page it's on without looking it up. But coding isn't about knowing. Coding is about knowing where to find the answer. I don't have to memorize the book. I just have to know how to find what I'm looking for. So this chart is really, really helpful for finding the right codes. The second kind of procedure that gets a little tricky is called a CABG, coronary artery bypass graft. And what happens here is that the coronary arteries, which are the ones here on the surface of the heart, it's the heart's blood supply, get blocked. And you may have heard of somebody who had a bypass or double bypass or triple bypass. That's what we're talking about here. And so what we do is that we create a bypass. And think of the highway that has a bad area. And we create a detour. Now, in the construction analogy, of course, we fix the road and then we take the detour down. In a heart, we never take the detour down. We create, notice here it shows the obstruction. So this is the bad piece of coronary artery. So we have, I'm going to change colors here. So we create this bypass around the bad part. And we've got another one here and another one here because they gave us lots of obstructions in this heart picture. And we create these bypasses. So this would be a triple bypass that this patient just received in their surgery. So when we create this bypass, we have to go get either an artery or a vein from somewhere else in the patient's body. So even though it's always an artery that we're bypassing, come on, it's always an artery that we're bypassing, we use either an artery or a vein to do the job, okay? That's where, when I was learning this, I got tripped up because I would get confused. If we're doing an artery bypass, where does the vein even come in? The vein is the structure we're using to do the bypass. So how we are coding it is, first of all, we have to go get the artery or the vein that we're going to use to create the bypass with. The most common vein that we use is the saphenous vein in the leg. And what we do is we make that little incision here in the patient's leg. We take out this piece and then we stretch the ends together, sew them back up, called an anastomosis, and the patient's leg is fine. So they got a few stitches in their leg when they're done with this procedure, but they have a heart procedure and they're okay. So we only need a very small piece. It's not like we're taking this big chunk of vein. Okay. All right. So that's the most common one, but it's not the only one that can be used. So we have to ask ourselves, how many bypasses are being performed? So in the heart, how many blockages are we creating a detour around? That's question number one. Question number two is, when we do that detour, that bypass, are we using an artery or a vein? Or you could do a combination. Let's say I'm having a double bypass. One's going to be an artery, one's a vein. It's a combination. They could both be arteries, both be veins, or be one of each. If we're doing a quadruple bypass, what is my breakdown between arteries and veins that we're using? All of this comes into play in your code selection. Right. So in your code book, pause the video and open your book to this code range, 33510 to 33516. Restart the video when you're ready to continue. Have that page open in front of you. When you get there, you will see that these codes are for doing a bypass using veins only. Veins only. So if I'm doing a triple bypass, all three of them are veins. Maybe I'm only doing a single bypass and it's a vein. Doesn't matter. They're only veins that we're using. And I'm going to open my book to that page. So I gave you a a picture on the page here of what the actual codes read, 33510 to 33516. And you can see coronary artery bypass, vein only, single coronary venous graft. That's your 33510. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 6 total. So how many did we do? But remember, these are only using a vein. Okay, so here's where my codes start in my book that I have pictures on the screen. Prior to that, I have this whole, get it in the video here, 2 paragraphs of directions called the guidelines. And a lot of times coders, especially new coders or student coders, don't spend the time reading those guidelines. But they make a big difference in getting this right. Those guidelines on that page say harvesting of the saphenous vein is included when you build these codes. So if we cut open the patient's leg and we get that piece of vein, you do not get to be billed for it. You do not get to bill the insurance. It is included. However, what if we don't use the saphenous vein? We get one from the upper extremity, or we get one from the femoropopliteal. Those are very common ones. Popliteal is the area behind the kneecap. Femoral is referring to the femur. So we're talking about the upper leg on the back when we talk about the femoropopliteal. Or we can get one here from the arm. Guess what? Harvesting from the upper extremity or the fempop is not included in this code, meaning I get to bill extra for this harvest because we used this one instead of the saphenous. So paying attention to those guidelines tells you when you can bill it and when you can't bill it. And guess what? That drives your reimbursement at your doctor's office. So reading those 2 paragraphs make all the difference in your money so that you're not billing when you're not allowed and you are billing when you are allowed. Okay? So these codes are when you're doing only veins in the bypass. Well, what if that's not what we did? Go to this code set, 33533, which means you skip a little section. We'll come back to it. 33533 to 33536, which I have pictured here on the screen. There's also 3 paragraphs of guidelines before those codes. Those guidelines, again, talk about the harvesting and when you can and when you cannot bill. And these are for when you're using just an artery, a single, double, triple, or quad. So now you know how to bill it if we use just a vein and how to bill it if we use just an artery. Well, what happens for a combination? Some artery, some vein. So let's say we do a quad bypass, 2 of each. 2 arteries, 2 veins. Okay? The first part you do is you use these same codes to identify your artery. So if I'm doing a quad, but only 2 of them are arteries, I'm going to pick 2 arteries from this page. The second part of the code, which is the 2 veins, you're getting from a 3rd section. This code range is an add-on code to report your veins. So when you look at that code range, I didn't put a picture of it. So when you put in that code range, you will see that those are all add-on codes. They all have that plus sign in front of it, meaning that's an add-on code. Can't be used alone. And the section is called Combined Arterio and Venous Grafting. Combined. And this is only for the vein part of that combination. So you're going to tell me how many arteries and then how many veins got combined with it. All right, so If we are doing a coronary bypass using 2 arteries, we can do a coronary bypass of 5 using 3 veins and 2 arteries, and then a coronary artery bypass using 1 internal mammary graft, artery graft, and 3 venous grafting. I gave you 3 different examples here. So what I want you to do is pause the video and code those 3 scenarios. Coronary using just 2 arteries, coronary bypass using a combination, and then a coronary artery using again a combination, and we tell you that we use the mammary artery. So my question is there for that one, can you code for the harvesting of the mammary artery? In order to answer that, you need to know where it's located, and the mammary artery is on the chest wall. You can Google that if you didn't know that. And then read the guidelines, the rules on what harvesting can you bill separately, and can the mammary artery be billed separately. So what I want you to do is now pause the video, code them, think about that mammary artery, and then restart the video because the next slide has all the answers on it. It does you no good just to advance the video without trying it yourself. But if that's what you do, that's okay too, I guess. So pause the video now. So here's your answers for how you would code those 3. If you did not get it correct, please re-look at my answers and compare them to your answers and figure out why I say this is the answer versus what you came up with. Figure out why you went wrong. I also want to tell you that there is no need for modifier 51. Some of you might go, well, this is a second procedure. I need that modifier 51. No. Because it's an add-on code, you do not use a modifier 51 with your add-ons. Regarding the mammary arteries on the chest wall, the guidelines say you can only bill for an upper extremity harvest or a femoropopliteal or fempop artery or vein. Mammary is not one of those, so you do not get to bill for the mammary artery harvest. That is the end of cabbage coding. So pretty much everything else in the heart is kind of straightforward. I don't want to say it's perfectly straightforward just because the heart is so complex. I do want to talk about one other thing, and I don't have any slides for it. So I'm just going to go back and give us a blank. We're just going to go back and put that on our screen. In your cardio section in your code book, you, at the beginning, before all the code, you have a picture of arteries that are labeled with names. The next page are the veins labeled with names. Now, not every one of them is on there. That mammary one would not have been on here. However, many of them are labeled on those pictures. Those are really great for you to figure out where things are located. For example, I'm looking at this, and you may have heard of your jugular vein or your carotid vein, which are here in your neck. There are procedures for the heart that refer to the arteries and veins that supply blood to the head. They're not going to name them by name, but you need to know that that carotid takes the blood up and the jugular takes the blood down. And so those are the two, the artery and the vein, that supply the blood supply to the head. And so that would be how you would select that particular code. Another section I want you to refer to is in your Appendix L. Okay? Pause your video, find your appendix sections, and find Appendix L, and then restart the video. I'm actually going to pause mine as well and bring the textbook up on the screen, because this is a really important concept for cardio coding. Okay, so I have up Appendix L, and Appendix L is talking about the vascular families. Well, vascular is referring to your blood flow. So this I'm going to read it and then I'm going to explain it. Appendix L is a vascular branching model that assumes that the aorta, vena cava, pulmonary artery, or the portal vein is the starting point of doing a heart catheterization. And then the branches have been categorized into first, second, third, and beyond. Okay? So what they're talking about here is that when we thread a catheter into a patient, let's say we're doing a heart catheter, typically we incise or cut the patient down in their leg, and we insert the catheter into the vein, and we thread it up to the heart. And then we look at whatever it was we needed to look at. Well, to look at what we need to look at, we have to get it through all the right arteries and veins so that our catheter, which has a little camera at the end, is in the right place to see what we need to see. So when we talk about the first order, second order, third order, etc., we're talking what turns did we take? So if you think of somebody who lives on a main road in your town, and let's say the main road going through my town is called M24. It's the main road here in the city that I live in Michigan. And so if we call M24 as being that starting point of catheterization, okay, well, give me directions to your house. We're going to make one turn. Now we're on a smaller road. You're going to make yet another turn. Now we're on into a neighborhood little road. And then you're a couple of turns into that neighborhood to actually get to your road all the way back in this neighborhood. Well, that's what we're talking about here, is we're taking that catheter from the main road onto the small roads. Sometimes we will back the catheter up. I'm going to change colors for my pen here. Sometimes we back the catheter up and we take a different turn because maybe we need to look at two structures that are very near each other. So we pull it out a little bit, we take a different turn. We pull it out, take a third turn. We may pull it all the way back out to the main road and go a completely different way. So we need to pay attention to how many twists and turns this catheter took while being thread through the cardiovascular system. Okay. So that's what this chart is talking about, is that the thoracic aorta, where does it turn? How many roads go off of this thoracic aorta? Well, this is one of the roads. And then where does that road go? Here, here, and here. Where does the top road go? Here or here. This road can go to these places. This road goes to these places. Okay? So it's giving you just how small these can go. Why is this appendix important? Well, because you probably could guess where the thyrocervical artery is, but I don't know how many turns it takes to get to it. Is it the first turn, the second turn, third turn? You will see code, and then let's throw in ones that don't. Here's one. This is not a familiar word to me. A lot of these other ones are referring to the bones, and so I can guess where they are. But that one I just circled, the common interosseous, I have no idea where in the body that is. Guess what? I'd have to Google it or look at a chart. Right? But if I look here, the axillary means armpit, brachial means arm. Okay, at least I have an idea of where in the body I'm even talking about. I still don't know exactly where, but I'm getting close. Okay. So when you go in to do some of the coding for the catheterization, it'll actually say second order, third order, fourth order. And if you don't know where that artery falls in this chart, that's why this appendix is here. And you can see that this appendix is several pages long with lots of pictures of different body parts showing you locations of things. Do you have to know all of this? Well, you might need to know some of this to get through an assignment. Okay, that's first. But once you graduate from Ross, do you need to know all of this? Well, that depends on where you go to work. My career, I have not needed to know these. But I'll tell you, interventional radiology cardiovascular coders are in high demand because it is so specialized and you need to know so much information. They're in high demand. So what kind of paycheck do you think they get? They earn their money. Okay, so do you want to specialize in this? Well, you probably have no idea here at the beginning of your career. You may make that decision 8-10 years from now that you really like the heart and you kind of have a knack for this and you're kind of pursuing that higher paycheck. This may be a route to go. So some of you will need to know it, some of you will not. These are a lot of times your cardio surgeons that are going to be billing these kinds of things. So if you don't work for that kind of office, guess what? You kind of remember it's there, but you don't have to memorize it. And this is really complex. I know about this much of it. I certainly have not specialized in this at all. So just wanted to point out that this appendix was even there and what this order thing even meant.